The negotiators in Moscow failed to reach any agreement, and Putin's daughter was caught on TSN cameras. Subscribe to our hit channel, watch the broadcast, and be sure to comment on what you found most interesting. Here are a few topics from today's episode. The Russians have noticeably intensified their activity on the Bakhmut-Kramatorsk section of the front. How is the battle for uninterrupted logistics unfolding?
We are thrilled to bring you an absolutely groundbreaking and truly unparalleled mega-exclusive report, meticulously prepared and presented by the highly esteemed and reputable sports network, TSN. This is a story you won't find anywhere else, offering unprecedented access and insights into a major development.
A TSN journalist spoke with the woman who is called Putin's daughter. Did she deny her own blood? Dogs as anti-aging friends for women. When we interact with dogs, it helps us reduce this and accordingly seems to delay the process. How scientists explain this ability of four-legged friends. Despite yesterday's disputes and the blocking of the podium, today the Verkhovna Rada switched to turbo mode and adopted the final version of the budget for next year. After consultations with deputies, a number of changes were made to the budget. In particular, they increased the share of personal income tax that remains in local budgets to 64%. 1 billion hryvnias were added for the purchase of weapons and military equipment. And teachers' salaries will be increased by 50%. Starting January 1st by 30% and from September by another 20%. The increase in teachers' salaries was one of the main topics of parliamentary criticism of the budget draft, while finding money to raise military salaries will be a challenge. According to Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko, the monetary support for soldiers serving on the front lines can be increased more effectively by utilizing expenditures in the security and defense sector. However, the main problem with the current budget is a deficit of $45 billion. Of that amount, it is still unknown where $19 billion will come from. All hope rests on international support and the adoption of today's state budget. This, according to the finance minister, should help in negotiations with the IMF and other financial donors.
At the present moment, the national budget currently allocates a substantial 1.3 trillion Ukrainian hryvnias for essential monetary payments to all military personnel, ensuring their financial well-being. We firmly believe that strategically reallocating essential funds to combat units, specifically reallocating crucial financial resources to those vital units that are actively defending on the very front line, can indeed be effectively done within these existing funds by carefully saving money from various other areas that, as of today, are not as critical or impactful.
The European Union has already stated that over the next 2 years, they are ready to cover 2/3 of Ukraine's financial needs. The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, announced that this amounts to 90 billion euros. The rest is supposedly to be covered by other international partners. They plan to obtain the money using two methods. Either through a reparations loan and frozen Russian assets, which Belgium is actively opposing as it fears legal and financial risks, or by taking it from the EU budget. The official clarified that for budgetary support to Ukraine, they will use the Macro Financial Assistance Scheme or the Ukraine Facility. As for military aid, the plan is to prioritize spending money on production and procurement, either in Ukraine or in EU countries. The main goal of this is to further strengthen Ukraine's defense industrial potential and to integrate its capabilities into the European defense industrial base. Ursula von der Leyen stated that the EU will do everything possible to help our country withstand the Russian onslaught.
We all know that we can never match the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people, but we can match their resilience, their determination, their perseverance, and we can provide them with the means to defend themselves and the opportunity to negotiate peace from a position of strength. And since pressure is the only language the Kremlin responds to, we can also increase it. We must raise the cost of war for Putin's aggression. We do not want peace, and no one wants peace, more than Ukraine does. That is why today we are sending a very strong signal to the Ukrainian people that we are here for the long haul.
Winter aid for Ukraine. The United Kingdom has decided to allocate an additional £10 million for the repair of our energy infrastructure, which has been damaged by Russian shelling. Announcing this decision, the UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper stated that Putin seeks to escalate the war. Over the weekend, we saw continued heavy strikes that resulted in power outages for hundreds of thousands of people. While President Putin seeks to turn off the lights and plunge Ukraine into darkness, we will continue working to turn the lights back on, emphasized Yvette Cooper. The explosion at a garage cooperative in Kharkiv damaged several apartment buildings, cars, and garages with its shockwave, and a fire broke out. During the clearing of the rubble, rescuers found the body of a deceased person. 2 more people were injured. The cause of the explosion is currently being investigated by the police. Investigators are examining the area and collecting eyewitness testimonies. A 10-year-old girl was wounded in Nikopol, Dnipropetrovsk region. She was injured as a result of an artillery strike. A man was also injured by an FPV drone strike. The city has been under enemy fire since morning. And in Ternivka, the occupiers attacked the home of a priest. A relative of the priest was killed, 3 people were wounded, and another man died during a repeated strike on the city. The number of people killed by shelling in Kherson has risen to 3, and another man was wounded in the attack. A UAV struck the transport depot, damaging trolley buses and the building. The occupiers killed 2 people, residents of Kostiantynivka and Slovyansk in Donetsk region. 5 more wounded civilians required medical assistance in Lyman, Vodyanska, and Oleksievo-Družkivka. The enemy has noticeably intensified its activity on the Bakhmut-Kramatorsk section of the front. Mainly sabotage groups from the 3rd Russian Combined Arms Army are operating there, attempting to disrupt the connection between the Ukrainian rear and the front line. The Foreign Robotic Systems Platoon of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade is trying to neutralize all enemy efforts with the help of remotely piloted iron assistance. You will see this on the screens during the report. You will see a QR code about this. This is a fundraiser specifically for the needs of the NRC platoon of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after Prince Konstantin Ostrowski. How is the battle for uninterrupted logistics going, and why is it so important to help the soldiers? Watch the report from our correspondent. TSN Oleksandr Motorny and Donat.
They don't move forward like they used to. It used to be that they would advance, drive out, and that was it.
For now, they haven't, but we don't rule out that possibility. When the enemy advances now, they generally avoid and try their best to avoid passing through our combat positions. They try their best to look for uncovered gaps, unprotected areas. So, in just a few sentences, the commander of the Sapsan Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 30th Mechanized Brigade summed up the main point of what's happening now in the defensive zone. Brigades on the Bakhmut-Kramatorsk section of the front on both sides of the M03 highway, where, according to Demok, there hasn't been any quiet on the ground since the fall of 2022.
There haven't been any mechanized attempts for quite some time, but there are constant infantry assaults, the enemy gathering in small groups and advancing, amassing, and securing positions on one section or another. In
the air, there's constant hunting going on, says the deputy commander of the 30th Brigade's Ground Robotic Systems Company.
There's been an increase in FPV drone activity. There are now a lot of FPV drones just waiting in ambush. It's precisely these waiting drones that are our biggest problem and the greatest challenge right now in any logistical mission.
Mainly in order to disrupt frontline logistics here, the enemy sends its sabotage and reconnaissance groups into the Ukrainian rear. They
use the tactics of sabotage and reconnaissance groups. Their main task is to infiltrate our rear, cut off logistics, and isolate our positions from supplies and support.
In turn, their primary and most important job is to effectively thwart the enemy's aggressive efforts.
Right now, the foundation of everything is logistical support, especially at the front line. This applies both to the infantry and to the UAV crews who are positioned closer to the infantry, and the same goes for mortar positions and the supply of ammunition. They are
the ground mobile group of the NRC company of the 30th Mechanized Brigade. Every day, sometimes several times a day, these soldiers transport their robots in army SUVs, getting as close as possible to the line of combat contact.
To the absolute furthest possible point we can safely and securely reach, more or less, and then at that precise moment we carefully unload the NRC, meticulously hook up the trailer, and from there the highly skilled operators then take complete control and continue moving directly and swiftly to the very front line of operations.
It seems simple and easy, but in reality, the NRC drop-off zone is under constant enemy fire.
It's within artillery range, and even more so for UAVs.
The path of drones to the front line. It's also a real quest where mud-filled potholes are the least of your problems.
This is a robot. It has already been hit twice. Those were drones, specifically waiting drones.
This foreign robot owes its rescue to Krava and Nikisha. When an enemy FPV drone hit the Ukrainian NRC on its way to the front line, the guys rushed out on a quad bike to evacuate it.
The entire field, everything is covered in fiber.
Fiber optic cable, right?
Fiber optic cable, even walking through it on foot would probably be very difficult. And
I could get tangled up, yes. Even at speed, his helmet flew off. It
is really tangled up there. Yes, when we were evacuating the machine, my helmet flew off.
So you were driving at speed, just driving?
On the ATV, yes. And it got so tangled that my helmet flew off. I just managed to unbuckle in time, otherwise it could have been much worse.
They were covered in mud up to their ears, but they completed the drone rescue mission.
I'm filming a video for the memories about how we went with the cow.
Today, already repaired and ready for a new mission, the UAV team once again set out toward the front line.
So that they can keep working further.
Ground robots, says the commander of the MRK company of the 30th Mechanized Brigade, are capable of more than just logistics.
There are critical missions for specialized mining operations, both directly in front of the enemy's positions and deep behind enemy lines. And additionally, let's consider the dedicated kamikaze drone operators who will meticulously and precisely drive their drones up to engage both the first and the second defensive lines of the enemy's formidable defense. And they will drive straight into their shelters and try to destroy them.
But most importantly, Daimok is convinced that now, thanks to their remotely piloted mechanical assistance, their unit has significantly reduced risks and is reliably supplying their infantry comrades on the front line with everything they need.
We no longer use vehicles, or if we do, it's much less. Before, we constantly needed to deliver supplies and ammunition. It was a daily necessity. Now we've reduced this many times over. From
the Bakhmut-Kramatorsk sector of the front, Oleksandr Motorny, Oleksandr Shian, and Serhiy Shpor. TSN 1+1.
In Russia, the Druzhba oil pipeline has been blown up again. Local residents are posting photos and videos of the explosion and its aftermath on their social media. In particular, witnesses describe a rumble accompanied by bright flashes. The attack on the oil pipeline was carried out near the settlement of Kyzynsky-Vysilki on the Taganrog-Lipetsk section of the pipeline. According to a Bigur source, an explosive device with remote detonation and additional flammable mixtures was used to destroy the section of the pipeline to achieve greater combustion. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine confirmed to journalists that in Brussels, the Ukrainian delegation headed by the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, held consultations regarding peace negotiations. Umerov met with national security advisors from the United Kingdom, Germany and France for further coordination of efforts and assessment. Yesterday, the Ukrainian side had a brief conversation with Steve Witkoff after his visit to Moscow. However, Sibiha did not disclose the details of this conversation. The Ukrainian diplomat is in Brussels at the Ukraine-NATO Council, where the allies confirmed additional support for Ukraine totaling $1 billion. Under the Pearl program, the member countries of the alliance also expressed their desire to have a seat at the table of peace victories, to the extent that they feel a threat to their own security.
Right now, we are building on the 20-point document that was developed in Geneva. I also want to confirm to you that the American delegation heard the Ukrainian delegation and the document continues to evolve. Yes, there are the most sensitive issues, which are put in brackets and left for the leaders to consider.
What do you think about the so-called peace negotiations? Be sure to write about them in the comments to this broadcast on YouTube. Of course, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. In the meantime, I will continue with the TSN broadcast. The United States cannot fund Ukraine indefinitely. That's a quote, no matter how long the war lasts. The U.S. Secretary of State said this in an interview with Fox News. Marco Rubio also emphasized that it is unrealistic for Russia to continue the war for another 4 to 5 years. He noted that if you compare how much territory the Russians controlled at the start of the invasion and now, you can see how much the Ukrainians have pushed them back. The U.S. Secretary of State emphasizes that what is happening now is a war of attrition and that Washington is trying to figure out how it can be ended in a way that protects Ukraine's future and so that both sides can accept it. The day before, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner spent 5 hours with Putin. No compromises on the peace plan were reached, he reported afterwards. Advisor to the Russian dictator Ushakov and U.S. correspondent for KTSS Olga Koshelenko. Next, everything that is known at this moment.
Ordinary people wait in traffic jams while the motorcade speeds the distinguished guests freely to the center of Moscow. With them is their constant guide, Kirill Dmitriev. He leads Witkoff and Kushner from a coffee shop to a restaurant, strolls with them through Red Square. Russian propagandists enthusiastically report on the events. They ate caviar, partridge, and venison. The American guests highly praised Russian cuisine. They were only invited to the Kremlin in the evening. For Witkoff, this is already his 6th visit to Putin. Some past mistakes have been taken into account. Translators are now present on both sides. And most importantly, with him, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who holds no official position in the American government, which is compensated by boundless trust, from his father-in-law. Previous solo negotiations between Witkoff and Putin face-to-face raised doubts about his ability to achieve results. 5 hours of talks ended after midnight. And again, no concrete compromises were reached, at least that's what Putin's aide, who was present at the negotiations, reported.
There were things we could agree on, and the president confirmed this to his counterparts. Some things drew our criticism, and the president did not hide our critical and even negative attitude.
U.S. President Donald Trump held a cabinet meeting on Tuesday. Nothing new, except that the war is complicated and terrible, but the U.S. is no longer spending money on it. He did not report anything else on the topic.
I am not giving anything away. We are selling NATO equipment. European countries are paying us for the equipment at 100% of the price, and then they bring it to Ukraine or do something else with it. But we are trying to regulate this.
After the negotiations, Witkoff and Kushner briefly stopped by the American embassy to inform Trump of the results via secure communication. The ever-obliging Dmitriev was waiting for them by the fence to escort them to the airport. Questions from Russian propagandists? The guests ignored them. According to flight radar, Witkoff and Kushner headed to the United States. President Zelensky said the day before that the American side had received a signal about the results. The next steps will depend on this.
If the positive signals from all parties involved truly work out as expected, and if there is an absolute assurance of fair play and mutual respect with our esteemed partners, then it is highly probable that we might arrange to meet very, very soon. We anticipate a comprehensive and productive meeting with the official American delegation, which will represent their government's interests. At what level we'll meet depends again on the signals. If the signals are such that if they allow for the possibility and chance of quick and global but swift decisions, then the level will be higher.
The previous in-person round of negotiations with the Ukrainian side took place on Sunday in Miami. At that time, progress was noted with the caveat that there is still a lot of work ahead. On Monday, Zelensky, European leaders, and Witkoff spoke again by phone. Reporting from Washington, United States, Olga Koshelenko, Maxim Shenkarenko, TSN 1+1.
A Turkish shipping company is suspending all operations with Russia after strikes on their tanker. Besiktas Shipping stated that they had allegedly strictly complied with all international sanctions against Moscow and the price cap imposed by the European Union and the Group of Seven. However, security in the region has now become more tense, so they concluded that it is too risky for their vessels and crews to cooperate with Moscow. Let me remind you, this company owns the oil tanker Marsin, which was damaged near the coast of Senegal. According to preliminary data, 4 external explosions occurred there at night, which caused water to enter the engine room. The ship's crew was not injured. Also last week, 2 other tankers from Russia's Shadow Fleet were attacked near the coast of Turkey. Information was circulated in Ukrainian media that Russia is behind these special operations.